role for a private conversation, that's right. But there's a role for timely feedback. And so he made the decision that the performance was so bad that it had to do it in a timely fashion. So he did some really good stuff. First, he did not attack me as a human being, unlike Patty over there, who said I was an embarrassment. He also made a concrete suggestion. He told me why it was important. And so when you're giving feedback, and you're trying to save women's lives, you're going to be choosing interested in giving feedback to medical students. It's very important. And so sometimes you have to tell people how it's important. All right, I do have, by the way, did you notice that some of these things were actually interesting? So this one right here, the faculty were unapproachable in this other institution, and the residents didn't like to get feedback. And so the faculty didn't, got to be a vicious cycle where the faculty thought the residents didn't like feedback, so they didn't give it, so the residents wanted more feedback. So it's not just one institution has these types of issues. And then this one was also, attending said, we're doing a great job teaching. The resident said, yeah. And the attending said, I wish the residents would show up prepared in the OR. And the resident said, we show up very prepared in the OR. So the disconnect is not unique to any particular institution at this point. So I have to give disclosures. So I am a consultant for Gumart Scientific who makes simulators. I'm a former board member. I have to give a disclosure for a whole year. My term is up, but my term ended in January. Advanced Life Support and Obstetrics is an international course on maternal safety. We're actually going to use their slides. So the last trip I made was in Basra. When I was looking at those slides, I was saying this is stuff that people can use, so you get a chance to see what I do when I'm seeing the world. And then my most recent travel to Iraq was supported by the United Nations. So I have to put that up there too. You'd think I'd be rich, right? You'd be wrong. So how to give feedback. So some of the terms that they're trying to convey here is feedback is not the same as an evaluation. So we go to the next slide. And that can be confused. So if I say to a particular student or resident, you've done X, Y, and Z, from the resident's viewpoint, maybe that's going to end up in the evaluation, so the resident's worried and end up concerned. Whereas frequently we're just saying, you can do something better, and this is a way to do it, realizing that somebody else may have told you something different. You're going to put it all together. So, but feedback can be anxiety-provoking, and it's up to us as feedback givers, which includes everybody in here. Yes, what, 22 more months you're going to be telling third-year medical students how to do it right?
They're doing it right now, because I'm asking for feedback for our program, what we can do better right now.
Yeah. Good. So sometimes you have to distinguish between feedback and this is your evaluation. Evaluation is a higher stakes discussion. So with feedback, the learners are happier, they're more motivated, they're more likely to improve. And without feedback, they're less motivated, and they can continue to do the same wrong stuff that they've been doing. So that's probably the most critical role, is that people don't know they're doing something wrong, they'll just keep doing it. And those of us that have been around education for a while know that sometimes there's just sort of a, well, this is how we always have done it, and it turns out that that's wrong. And we have some residents very appropriately pulling up ABOG or ACOG technical bulletins and saying, this is what ACOG says, this is what we're doing, and maybe we should change. So that's good. So this is what the slides say for your feedback. Timely, ordered, focused, and forward-looking. So you saw one of the papers was about structured feedback, so sometimes we do give structured feedback. In the sim lab, the residents see me go down the list. This is what you were supposed to have done. You did 1, 2, and 3. You didn't do 4. You did 5 and 6. So that's sort of ordered and structured. Timely is what Dr. Huffler demonstrated. It's now. You know that lecture you gave 4 months ago, you could have done a better job. That's not really very timely. It's not going to be very helpful. It is a problem that we have when we give our evaluations on residents and students because they see the information 3 weeks later. Do you know when we get the feedback on the clerkship? It's about 14 months after the first group of students goes by. So it's kind of hard for us to say, hey, let's make ourselves better based on this 14-month-old data. For our site visit, it was also 14-month-old data the site visitors had. So timing is critically important. Focused means, this is what the problem is. And then forward-looking is, what are we going to do different? And why is this important sort of ties into that too. So just to go through some of these observations. this one, timing, if it's emotionally charged, so that's where sometimes you do need to take a person off to the side. So some of it depends on your group. If you've got a group of one faculty member and 3 or 4 residents, and it's a good cohesive team to get feedback in front of the other residents, allows the other residents to learn the same thing if it's done properly, if it's not department evaluation. Whereas if it's you, the resident, and I, the faculty, think that you, the resident, need to have some dramatic improvement, then that's better done taking somebody aside. It needs to be timely though. So sometimes as program director, I do get, well, you know what resident X did? Have you told resident X? Well, no, I was going to let you do that. Well, by the time we set up our meeting, it's 3 weeks later. It's not timely. So I've been encouraging them. So when I get these emails, just so you know, that's my first question. Have you talked to the resident? All right. So one of the things about feedback is that first you can get the learner's improvement or impression of what he or she is doing well. So in SimLab, you've seen me say, what did you do right? And then the team discusses what they did right, what could you do different. If you allow the learners to figure out what they could do different, as opposed to the fact that I'm just saying this is what you could do different, that really helps them retain that information more than just a bold lecture sort of this. And then specific examples, you do not speculate as to why the deficiency exists. It's just, you know, this is what we expect, this is what you delivered, we need to get you up to this next level. It's up to them to figure out the why in most cases. I mean, once you start getting into impairment, then it's a different situation, but that's an unusual situation, and this is the regular situation. And then the learner needs to be a part of the plan. So again, when residents are not scoring high on their periodic test, we sit down and we say, you know, you need to do this, this, or this. Which one do you want? The resident picks the one they think will work better for her or him, and then away we go. Who knows what a feedback sandwich is? Okay, there you go. So tell them something good, tell them what you want to get different, tell them something good. That way they walk out of there feeling, and again, it's sometimes a high stress situation for the learner who feels like a subordinate. So if you give them something good, tell them what they need to do different, tell them something else good, then you move on. So Dr. Rich, you know how to hold a scalpel, you almost cut the baby's face, your closure was excellent, it was a very pretty closure on that uterus. I mean, that's a feedback sandwich.
Thank you, I did not feel attacked.
Good. Now this part of the talk is really for some of you that aren't, that are going to be lecturing more than you are now. So residents, when you go out and you start your practices, you may be called to speak to different groups in your community, and you're the new doc in town, people want to meet you, and you want to meet them, so they come to your practice. So you take opportunities to give lectures because that gets your face out there in the community. So sometimes you see these, you also give impromptu discussions with medical students. So these are some, yes?
I get 4 out of 5 of those. What is it?
What, you mean students on one rotation?
4 out of 5 of those apply to me. Does it mean anything?
You're challenging.
Yeah, that's probably what it means. Yeah. Well, who wants to describe the overachiever?
Other than Dr. Huxley.
Yeah, other in terms of a medical student that you've seen, what have you seen when you're trying to work with medical students, with the overachievers?
Sometimes they're so focused on I need more, I need more, I need more, that it's like, just calm down. You can't get everything in one day.
Yeah, they're too looking at, let's see how much I can get done instead of doing quality work on one item at a time, being tasked.
Yes. So they're also more interested in impressing you than doing a good job and taking good care of the patient. So you can't just ignore it. From a student level, when you got one of those people in your group, it actually interferes with your education because there's so much attention being directed towards that person that it's not diffused to equal out for everybody else. So it's the instructor's job to rein in the overachiever. So again, that. All right, the uninterested learner. So what are you going to do with this person?
Engage them.
How do you do that?
Those things right there, make eye contact.
Okay. So let's have, your student is going to go into neurosurgery. This student is brilliant. He is so smart. This is a real person. A long time ago. He is so smart he doesn't ever have to crack a book because it's just boom. He's brilliant. He shows up late. He doesn't write good notes. And when you ask him to go look up something, he doesn't bother to do it. What's your conversation? Anybody? Yes?
Because I went to med school, so these people. And they didn't match.
Okay.
So your people skills matter because you are going to be taking care of people. So if you can't demonstrate enough effort to get along and do what you're supposed to do here, what makes anybody think that you're going to be good at what you want to do or that you're going to take good care of people? It really does matter. Two of the smartest people in my class didn't match because they had horrible interactions with people all year long and they didn't get to do what they wanted to do.
So this real person, my conversation was, you want to go to neurosurgery? You don't do what we tell you. You don't show up on time. You don't look interested. You are going to get eaten alive in your residency program. Now, when faculty evaluations came out, yes.
I see people saying, no, not for uninterested learners, but for group in general. If you're on the plane, and you have pregnant lady who is 35 weeks pregnant and about to have birth, they're not asking who is obstetrician on the plane, or I'm neurosurgeon, I can't touch this patient. They're asking who's the doctor here. Do we have a doctor here? So expectations will be for our rotation. You guys get the little baby. Okay.
One of the general surgery residents, I think, our donor, delivered a baby on an airplane. And he had only done it in medical school. So,
Yeah, something.
Our emergency room physicians were like under 2 months of impression after they delivered one baby here in our ER. So happens in real life.
So when you have these conversations, the student has options on the evaluation. And option one is, Dr. Olsen, he took extra time to help me grow. I'm going to give him a 5. I don't think that happened, though. I think it was that SOB, he gets a 1. So just so residents know, when I see these outliers out there, it's not like I think, oh, that's a bad resident. Maybe that's a resident doing her job. And she got a bad evaluation because, and so actually the evaluations do tend to deteriorate as the residents get more senior. And I think that's probably part of the reason is the more senior residents are the ones that say, straighten up. And so students don't like to hear that. So if you're getting all 1s, well, that's a little different situation than 5, 5, 5, 1, 4, 4, 3, 1. And that's a solid one. All right, the angry learner. So again, this one, not terribly common at our level. It is if you're ever teaching a course where people are required to go to, this does then become common. So for the people that do these also courses, if you want to deliver babies in our hospital, go take the also course. They're thinking that's a waste of 2 days of my life. I'm angry. I could be out golfing, making money, spending time with my family. So in some situations, you do have to deal with this, and you just acknowledge their anger and explain to them that this is there to help them do the best that they can with it. If they can't settle down, then they can flunk the course and then have to do it over again. So they may as well straighten up. So again, the key point is don't ignore it. All right, unprepared. I guess my word of wisdom for the students is, I don't think students realize how much impact they have on their teachers. So I sit down with students. I've got my toys out there, my IUDs and birth control pills, and so first question to a student might be, well, tell me what you tell a 16-year-old if you're giving her birth control pills. I never thought about that. Second student, so what are the risks of an IUD? Now, what does that stand for again? So by that time, I don't care whether they learn anything or not, because they can show. But I do my job, I do as well as I can, but I don't care whether they learn or not, because they're obviously not interested. Now, the third student may have been really interested, but I've already lost my bond with this group. So we're just going to get through this, and we're going to go on. Actually, in the past, I have said, lecture's over, go home and read, we'll do it another day. I guess I've mellowed with age. So, if the student appears uninterested, the faculty member reflects that. If the student appears interested, the faculty member reflects that. So you actually have more impact on your education than you realize. Then there's the argumentative learner. Any thoughts on how to deal with this person? You know, when I go to Iraq, I take a British colleague with me. Sometimes we do things very, very differently. And so for the people in Iraq, they're building their own system. So they see, well, the Americans do it that way, the Brits do it that way, and we can do it a third way. So at some level, there's a difference between the argumentative learner and somebody that's trying to figure out how to do things in their own environment. But there are some that are just truly argumentative that you, again, have to, you know, this is one way to do it. So in my Iraq, this is how we do it in America, this is how they do it in Britain, and you can decide how you want to do it. There's no even argument about it. So at some level, this is what the ABOG Technical Bulletin says. It's valid. I realize that the United States Preventive Task Force Services says to do it that way. Well, they're both valid, and let's move on to the next topic. All right, so we are now going to have a breakout session. I really wanted the residents and the students to interact with each other, but I didn't want to have like, over here, over here. So some of you guys move over there, some of you guys move over there. And I want, and you guys, let's have 3 groups. That way everybody has to mix up. So I want to have, from each group, you have 5 minutes. What is the worst feedback you ever got, and what's the best feedback you ever got? Your group can all pick one.
For group 2.
For group 1. Group number 1.
All right.
Somebody needs to get that good. I think you need to
I need another resident.
Thank you.
Brad, you gotta join a group. Have to be involved.
He's an uninterested learner.
He's an uninterested learner.
He looks like an angry learner up there.
A little bit of both.
Are there 3?
You got good stories. Come sit in our group. You got great stories.
Dr. Sarkody, would you sit with group 2 or 1? Dr. Huffaker, would you sit with a group? What is the best feedback you ever got? What's the worst feedback? One example from each group. Oh. Put that down. Actually, I'll take this off for a second. All right. Get that second one. Take a couple more like that, and I can pick one.
Okay, yeah, because I'm good.
So one of my attending had said, Lauren, you're getting frustrated. think of how to improve whatever needs to be improved, not just meeting them. What kind of suggestions there
Okay.
So just don't turn it back on.
Oh, the next one.
Next slide's done.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's take about a minute. By the way, I thought you were gonna have more fun.
I did.
Oh, you had fun?
I mean, I did. I thought it was really good. I thought she sounded like she's from the Andy Griffith Show. Dr. Olsen.
I was playing.
I thought you were gonna stand up and tell them. Boring.
We don't have to get that excited.
Oh, okay, next time.
All right, we got it. All right, group one, are we ready to hear your best and your worst?
I was just such a bad student.
You can't leave. We're not done.
All right, go for it, group one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're group three?
We're group one.
Sorry, sorry. Well, group three, you look intelligent, group three, we'll let you go first.
So for best feedback, what did we do that was probably the best? Maybe like with your example of someone giving feedback, more like learning by example kind of thing. Someone telling you you can't do something, you need to improve on something, but then that person. That was her worst feedback.
We're gonna go with negative first.
Okay,
Okay.
negative feedback first. Someone telling him that he couldn't do something, not really explaining how to change, but you can change. I don't know, I'm messing it all up. You tell a story. Sorry.
I think the worst feedback I ever got was from an instructor when I was a student, basically telling me hey, you're carrying the wrong kit, and as far as like what I was carrying in my A bag, you're doing this wrong, you're slow on the obstacle course, and you're not going to make it in the squadron. And the bad thing is I knew the guy had been fired from squadron because his skills as a medic were bad, and he was out of shape, and I was like twice as fast as he was. And so I think it was one of those, I knew, instead of just trying to tell me, hey, this is what the things that I see, you know, you're doing wrong, I've done these things wrong, you know, give me some self-perspective about what errors he's made and like how to correct himself and move himself along as well as me. That would have been better, but instead it was just like, you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to be able to do this, you can't do this. And it was like, well, you haven't done all those. And in my head, while it's going, I'm just not in my head, you know.
Okay, best feedback. Setting an exam on it. Let me show you how to do it right.
So just generally speaking, just having like a conversation and being able to have those first couple minutes to say, okay, like, here's where I'm coming from, of the things I know and I want to learn, and here's the things that you can provide and to teach me. And so if you have that conversation of being on the same page of what you generally can talk about and information you can gain, it's like, okay, sure, like, I'd really love to see that. Okay, then I'll make sure that you can get in on the next case. I'll make sure that you can see this next time. That it a lot more so ends up being like both people end up happier that everyone was engaged because of communication.
Group 2, best and worst.
We didn't really have like specific examples of best and worst. We more just talked about like in this rotation specifically what they needed and the kind of feedback that they were wanting. And it comes back to communication. Like if we give them clear expectations from the beginning and communicate about that, then everybody's happy.
Rationale's important.
Yeah.
And say, you did great on that. Well, I'm not just doing that by accident. So I, point out the things that are good or need correction, but explain to me why so that I can remember that more effectively. Because if I know how that might have been perceived by a patient, how that might have put somebody in danger, whatever, it's going to be a lot more easy to remember.
All right, group 1.
I think that kind of going off of Carrie, kind of the worst, because nobody really had a good example of worst, but just not getting enough feedback, like not getting suggestions or how you did well, that is never effective. Best, I know on my last rotation on psych, I was having a hard time talking with difficult patients, like they wouldn't answer my questions, and I would get really frustrated. And my attending took me aside and said, hey, here's some really great ways of how to get around that, and just giving me suggestions of how to handle the difficult situation was really good.
All right, I'll give you worse. I was never used to doing spinal taps. In those days, every febrile seizure kid got a spinal tap. Everybody was mentioning get spinal taps. So we had to do lots of spinal taps. And 10 or 12 shots, I never got one. Because of probably a devastation out there because as an intern, I delayed because I knew what was going on. So that's how bad that feedback was. And then there was a day that there was a sick kid in the ER and there was nobody else around, and I had to do it. And there was nobody else that was doing it wrong. So, I mean, you can actually hurt patients by giving them feedback like this. All right, we're going to now talk about how to perform a lesson. All right. Am I back on? All right, here's me in Baghdad performing to these nice people here. I had to actually work hard to be that boring. I actually had to work at it, just so you know. So what are we going to talk about here? We're going to talk about performing a lecture, techniques to engage the audience, coordinating your verbal presentation, and demonstrating how to answer questions. So there must be some good things about lectures. What are they?
Interactive. Question and answer.
Yes. So you get something from an expert. Now the active teacher and the passive learner can be overdone. So death by PowerPoint is something that can be overdone. So I will now confess that this group interactions here, that's a new technique that everybody seems to, all the learners say you do that, like what we just did. Extroverts really like that. Introverts, you know, maybe not. And so I think it's going to continue, but I think we have to realize that not everybody likes it. And so when you thought your evaluations, I really would be interested to know what you thought of it. To be honest, when I go to a conference, I'm an introvert. And there's like, we're going to have a group discussion for 20 minutes now. I'm thinking, you know, this guy doesn't know more than I do. I'm going to Starbucks. I'm going to drink some coffee, and I'm going to read the internet, and I'll learn it there. I mean, that's how I am. I think Dr. Huffaker's the same way, if the truth were known. And that's not everybody, but that's me, and so I'm kind of interested in what this group feels like to know if I should be doing more of that or less of it. So, but I guess the key point being it's a performance, and that's something we're trying to instill here, so we're not just showing PowerPoint slides. Look at somebody was really doing a good job. Look how intent these students are. Do you know who was the teacher for that one? Okay, Dr. Rouse. All right. So they're definitely active participants, this group of learners here. They're definitely learning. They look motivated. And Dr. Rouse did have to do a lot of preparation to get ready. So she had to, you know, figure out how the simulator worked and plan ahead for what she was going to speak and things like that. So if you just get somebody else's slides and try to give a lecture, you're probably not going to do so well. You know, and I'm technically inept, so that little 30-second clip took me about an hour to make. So know your audience. You're going to give a different discussion to medical students than you're going to give to residents. Engage the audience. Understand your strengths. I think that's redundant. So try to keep in mind what you're trying to convey. So different groups, you're trying to convey different things. So when a person is talking to a medical student, really this gives some basic information that the person needs to know is really top of the list. And sometimes when a chief resident gives a grand rounds, the chief resident might be thinking, I hope they change things around here. I'm going to show some data because I think there's something we can do a little different here. And based on this data, I want to improve the health care my patients are getting. And so that would be, you know, down at the bottom there. And then in the middle are all those. That's sort of a transition from information to behavioral change. So you'll notice when we started here, I didn't introduce myself, and I just sort of started. So again, that was an example of how not to give a lecture. So the reason an introduction is to get people's attention, to tell them why it's important, so hopefully they'll pay attention and begin that process of engaging. So an introduction is critically important in getting your talk off to a good start. You know, the other things I did, I sort of looked a little sloppy. I was drinking my tea up here, just ignoring the audience. So not that I haven't ever seen that in one of our own lectures, but this is what you don't want. So you want your audience to be dynamic and engaged. So, you know, it's okay to use, you don't stand up here and tell jokes, but you might use a little bit of humor and get people to chuckle a little bit. If you're going to, so I told you a story, an anecdote just a little bit ago, which had something to do with the topic. It wasn't off target. It had something to do to pull together the concept. So, you know, keep it straightforward. Sometimes if you're seeing people doze off, then you start calling on them. You say, Dr. Erskine, are you awake? And Dr. Erskine nods and says yes. But just for a second there, when she heard her name, she got a little adrenaline jolt. And if she was about to fall asleep, she woke up some more. Dr. Brooks, you look very awake. You're on night float, aren't you? Good for you. You're awake. This slide's really for those that don't give too many lectures. So it's things to do when you are kind of anxious and you're starting to see your hands tremble and you don't like public speaking, but you got to do it. So this is a breathing exercise. You're getting rid of energy, jumping up and down. Find the nurture is an interesting one because you can look at somebody in the audience that actually you like, and so it used to be Patty I would look at, but now that I know what she really thinks of me, I might have to look at Dr. Huffaker because he did a really nice job of settling me down. So, all right. So preparation and practice, you know, if you're new at it, go to the room, stand there, plan ahead. It could be a problem though. They could move your room at the last second to some other location and you have to start all over again. And then if you're going to use, oh, that was part of the plan to disrupt the speaker and see if he could still perform, huh? Okay, good. You're going to do that before. You're not going to do it in the middle of it. You're going to do it before. You're going to recognize your anxiety. You're going to admit you have anxiety. You're going to go hide in the corner there. And you're going to come in. You're going to look sedate. Yes, I'm in charge here now. Well, I guess just think about how much of our lives is being actors and actresses. It really is. So you're sitting there, you're post-call. You're looking at this patient. You know you feel worse than she does. But you can't say that. You've got to say, I really, Mrs. Smith, I understand your concerns, and we're going to do something to make you feel better. Because that's what the patient needs, and you're going to do it. Even though that's not in your heart what you're feeling, you're going to be an actor, actress, and you're going to take care of that patient. So, I mean, it's a big part of our jobs, whether we like it or not. All right, so recognize your own styles. So if you like to hide behind the podium, then do that and recognize it. Find some other way to engage the audience. You remember Mr. Kelly a couple of weeks ago? Now that was audience engagement. That guy was good. If you sit down in a meeting with Mr. Kelly, he's pretty droll. He's an attorney. He just, these are the facts. But he's a showman. So you give him a different environment. He became a showman, wandering around the room, talking to different people. So again, that was an example of a pretty good performer from a guy who was definitely performing, because that's not his usual style in engaging people. Okay, and your energy level impacts the listener. So I was demonstrating a poor energy level before, and if the speaker has high energy level, then the learners kind of pick up on that. So think about your main points. I think the most important thing here is your time management. 15 minutes into the lecture when you say, and now my second point is, the audience may be going, oh no. Whereas, you're trying to say, this is what I'm going to cover. If you've got 5 minutes left and your most important point is still ahead of you, then you're going to skip over your most important point. So time management is critically important. And most rooms have clocks, so you can sit there. I've got 32 slides. I had a breakout session. Well, 1 minute a slide plus the video, I got plenty of time. So I can wax eloquently. And everybody's still awake from what I can tell. We got one right here. Your eyes are slipping down a little bit. Jump up and down or something, okay? All right, again, the introduction's important. Plan a transition. So we had our little breakout session as a transition between the two discussions. So thought that was a good place to transition. It got everybody moving around. People wake up again. Humans' attention span is about 20 minutes. So an hour-long lecture is actually a little long for, especially, there is a generational difference there. I can sit there longer than you can because I'm old. I guess that's the reason. And y'all need to jump around more. So if at 20 minutes you can show a video or do something a little different just to rejuvenate the audience, you're going to do better. So that is actually why we had that feedback session at that point, because that was the time to wake everybody up. All right, and this is just, again, break the pattern. Here's slide 1, here's slide 33, here's slide 47, here's slide 62. I mean, that gets long for the learners. If you look at my office, and you'll see a picture of the first spinal anesthetic first C-section done under spinal anesthetic in Baghdad, and she was an anesthesiologist, so it's her back you'll see in that picture. And she's an outstanding lecturer, Felicity Platt. So this part is, again, for the people that have more lectures in their future than their past. So what do you do about questions? I'm sorry, I'm not done yet. This is not, you're going to ask me questions. There's more slides. I apologize, but we'll get there. So there are several types. Sometimes questions make the presenter crabby, so that's why I put the crab up there. So so tell me about these different types. What's a clarification? Yep.
Explain what a clarification is a little bit better.
Okay, yes. What's a disagreement? Yeah, that can go back to the argumentative learner. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it's very, very professional. So in my anecdote about my colleague in Britain that we go to Iraq together, that's not how we do it. Well, okay. I mean, that's just, and we do that in front of everybody so they can see how you can professionally have a disagreement, because they're in a culture that you disagree, you might get shot. Yeah. What's a tangent? Right. Her cousin's Mormon. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. And unknowns, of course, are, what is the cause of preeclampsia? Could you kind of elucidate that? So clarifications, that just may be that you weren't clear. Or it could be that you thought the learners were at a higher level than they are, and so you just need to be a little more basic in your discussion. So it's actually good when you're getting these types of questions. That means they're interested enough to ask. So this is good to get this type of question. Disagreements and tangents, then sometimes you appeal to the audience. Well, how do you do it? And that way kind of takes the lecturer off the hook a little bit. Obviously, you need to gain control of the environment. But frequently, that is one way to diffuse the situation if you're starting to feel a little attacked is how does everybody else do that? And you usually find out you have allies in the audience. And then sometimes you just don't know the answer. And sometimes it's neither I nor anybody else in the world knows the answer. But sometimes it's, you just don't know. So one of the things that, residents bring their tablets, et cetera, when I see a resident looking stuff up on her tablet, I'm happy because that means she's paying attention. When I see a resident looking up on Facebook, I'm not happy because that means she's not paying attention. Lately, I've been seeing people looking up stuff, so that's good. And from my view, that's engaging, the residents engaged in the experience, and we can go straight to, gee, I don't know, what does whatever your source is say, and then the resident pops down, we all learn. So that's, to me, is an example of a good interaction. All right, so conclusions. I think the key points is be aware of the time, know your material thoroughly, plan your transition points, and give a performance. All right, questions, comments? The picture is from coastal California. Please ask a question. I feel like I've bored you. I think you can turn that off now. I think we're done. So, yes.